Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this breakout session on National Popular Vote Update, Making Every Vote Count. I'm Joy Cardine, League of Women Voters of Wisconsin board member, and I'm also your moderator for this session. It's being recorded so others can view it later. We are going to hear from two speakers during this breakout session about why we should change the Electoral College at the state level to guarantee that whichever presidential candidate receives the most popular votes in the U.S. becomes the president. We'll hear how this legislation works, how close it is to reality, and how to respond to the most common misperceptions and arguments from opponents. After we hear from our speakers, we'll discuss it and we'll welcome your thoughts and questions. You can type those questions in chat, but I think we're small enough that you can also allow me to call on you if you raise your hand. You can raise your Zoom hand and then I'll call on you and we won't be talking over each other. So let's welcome our speakers. EILEEN REAVEY is the National Grassroots Director for the group National Popular Vote. She works on building momentum and support for the National Popular Vote movement nationwide and trains volunteers to be organizers and informed advocates. She also co-founded the Grassroots Advocacy Group in Oregon to pass the National Popular Vote bill back in 2016. Also with us is Barbara Paterick. She is a board member of the League of Women Voters of Greater Green Bay. She is a member of the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin's Legislative Committee, where one of the issues she focuses on is the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. She participates in the National Popular Vote's Grassroots Volunteer Leaders Group, which is led by EILEEN REAVEY. So thank you, Barb and EILEEN, for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Joy, and good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you for joining us for this session today. So I'm going to start us off, and I always like to make sure that everyone is grounded in a little bit of an understanding on how we elect the president now before we jump into talking about how we should elect the president in the future. So you're all league members, so this will be brief. How we elect the president now is, of course, through the Electoral College. So on election day, you and I cast our ballots for the candidate of our choice, but the real vote that decides who the next president is occurs in December, when 538 electors cast their ballots to decide who the president is. Every state is allocated one electoral vote for every representative that they have in Congress. So at a minimum, if we look at Wyoming, they have, every state has at least 3 for their 2 US House member, or excuse me, for their 2 US senators and their 1 US House member. And then you add 1 more elector for every member of the House that a state has. So to win the Electoral College, a candidate needs to win at least 270 electoral votes, which that number is a majority of 538. So who are these electors, right? They decide who the next president is, but all of you as very well-informed individuals may not know who they are. You might not know who the electors were for the state of Wisconsin as individuals if we look at the 2020 election. So the US Constitution gives these states explicit power to decide how their electors are chosen. So specifically, Article 2, Section 1 says, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. So what that means is that state legislatures decide how to award their state and electoral votes. And this is a power that the Supreme Court has termed a plenary power or an absolute power of the states. So however a state wants to award their electoral votes is constitutional. The winner-take-all law, which we're about to talk about, that 48 states use, isn't in the Constitution. The congressional district system method that Maine and Nebraska use for awarding their electoral votes isn't in the Constitution. And so the same power that gives those states the ability to award their electoral votes in the way that they like is the same power that gives states the ability to say, hey, we want our electoral votes to go to the national popular vote winner, which is the legislation that my organization advocates for and that we're going to talk about a little bit today. So currently, 48 of our states use the winner take all law or statewide winner take all law. And so what this means is that whoever receives the most votes on election day receives 100% of the electoral votes for that state. So in California, in the 2020 election, when the Democratic candidate received the most votes, they got all 55 of California's electoral votes. Same thing in Texas, when the Republican candidate got more votes than anyone else, they got all 38 of Texas's electoral votes. So last year, if you were one of the 6 million Californians who voted for Donald Trump, or one of the 5.2 million Texans who voted for Joe Biden, your vote was effectively thrown out at the state line. The electors went to the Capitol in December and said, 100% of us are going to represent the other person because that's who the most amount of people voted for. It doesn't really matter who you voted for. So state law, how states choose to vote within the Electoral College, is how we end up with divergent elections, where the candidate who won the popular vote is not the person who won the Electoral College. So that divergence, we've had that happen out of 5 of our 46 presidents have been elected that way. That's over 10% of our US presidents have come into office after having not the most amount of voters behind them. And not only that, but this has happened twice in the last 2 decades and almost happened 2 more times. So this system, the way that we elect the president, is honestly hurting America because voters don't understand it. Voters can't get behind it. Voters don't feel like their votes matter. Candidates routinely campaign in only 38 of the states. Or excuse me, I apologize. It's a little bit earlier here on the West Coast. Candidates routinely only campaign in 12 states, routinely ignoring 38 of the states because they only campaign in states where it is a closely divided election. So every American's vote is not equal. So why are we electing the president still this way? Why not move to a system where we have a national popular vote, where every single vote is equal? Your vote in Wisconsin will be equal to my vote in Oregon. I can move to California, Pennsylvania, Maryland, wherever I want to go. Every American's vote will be equal, and it won't be determinative of what state they live in. And that's what the National Popular Vote Bill does. It modernizes our presidential elections, and it makes it so that candidates would have to campaign based on what is best for the most amount of Americans, not just based on interests of, okay, what's going to win me votes in Pennsylvania? What's going to win me votes in Florida? How can I game it to really make sure that I get a couple more votes here? No, it says, hey, this is an idea that's pretty popular across the country. And hey, a lot of people are going to vote for me because I support that. Doesn't that sound a little bit more logical? That's how our governors are elected. That's how our US senators are elected, our members of city council, all the way down to dog catcher in most cities, if that's an elected position, is, hey, if you get the most votes, then you should become the person who wins. Not, oh, you got second place? Great, please go into office. So the way that we make this happen is through the National Popular Vote Bill. The National Popular Vote Bill would guarantee the presidency to the candidate who received the most popular votes in all 50 states and DC. So you win the popular vote, you win the Electoral College. And the way that we do this is that this is a bill passed by states, so your state legislators, and it changes how Wisconsin awards your electoral votes and how your state votes in the Electoral College. So a state replaces its current law, which in 48 of the states, including Wisconsin, is the winner take all law. It says, all right, we're getting rid of that law. We're replacing it with a new law that says we want our electors to be determined based on whoever got the most popular votes in all 50 states and DC. And the really important thing about this to realize is that this bill only goes into effect in all of these respective states when states with at least 270 electoral votes have been committed to the compact. And so that's that magic number of that majority of the Electoral College. So once enough states have come together to control the majority of the Electoral College and say, hey, we're all going to award our electoral votes to the person who won the most popular votes nationwide, Then the compact triggers into effect, and we no longer have this broken system of electing the president. And for the very first time in our nation's history, we're going to have one person, one vote in the way that we elect the president. And so this bill has already been passed by 15 states and DC, representing 195 electoral votes. So we're over 70% of the way there towards making this happen. And we only need states with 75 more electoral votes to join for this bill to go into effect. And so this map shows you some of the progress that we've made so far. The green states are states where the bill has already passed. Orange indicates a state where we've passed at least one legislative chamber. If you add up those states that are orange, we have 9 additional states representing 88 electoral votes. If we just got the bill through those states again in a future session, we'd be done. The bill would go into effect and we would have a national popular vote for president. So it's not as if we've gotten 195 and we have no idea how we're going to get the other 75. We have a pretty clear path, and it's just a matter of when this happens, not if. So we're going to elect the president by popular vote by 2024, or at the very latest by 2028, because we are going to make this happen. We only need 5 or 6 more states to pass this legislation for this to go into effect. And so 2 of the states that are really close in the pipeline are Virginia and Michigan. So Virginia, I'm sure you all are probably potentially getting as many emails about Virginia as I am. They are one of the 2 states that they elect their state legislature in odd numbered years instead of even numbered years. So that means that they're having their election right now. On Tuesday, they're going to, that's when election day is. And based on that, then their longer legislative session is actually next year, when most states are in a shorter year. Wisconsin's a little bit different because you have year-round legislatures, but most states don't meet every year, and they have a long session and a short session. So all that being said, Virginia is a really critical priority for us in the coming weeks. We're closely watching what the outcome of the election is going to be, and we are ready to pounce on it as long as things go the way that we need them to look like the bill is going to be ready to pass next year. We've been lobbying there for 3 years. We have a really big grassroots organization there. We have a big coalition there, including the League of Women Voters of Virginia. I'll actually be presenting at one of their meetings in about 3 weeks to talk about our legislation. And we're hoping that that's going to be the next state to pass national popular vote. And so that'll be 13 more electoral votes. A little bit further down the pipeline is Michigan. So about a month ago, we announced that we are considering a ballot initiative in Michigan. So this will be the first time that we proactively put the question to the voters on if a state should join the national popular vote.
Is that Colin or Craig? I can't hear.
And so,
though I was just going to say I'm watching this
excuse me, someone
annual issues briefing.
Mute yourself. Mute yourself.
Has once a year on Saturday morning from 9 to noon.
I can't find it. So
I think it's Kathy.
I was just gonna if you could please mute yourself. During that period, I might have to mute this thing that I'm listening to.
You need to mute it now. I'm very sorry. I can't locate her.
Well, I mean, you can call me, but I just wanted you to know what was going on here.
So
Joy, isn't that Melanie? Sorry.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Go ahead. Thank you. So in Michigan, we're going to have this proactive ballot measure, and this is something that it's very early. So we're still working on. We just got our language back on what would be on the petition. We're going to have to get about 400,000 signatures to put this on the ballot, and we're going to have to raise a lot of money, to be quite frank. So this is something that as long as things look like they're going well, the voters of Michigan will be able to vote on in November of 2022 and say, hey, we want Michigan to be a part of the National Popular Vote Compact. And so we're really excited about that. And so there will be a lot of ways to get involved in that campaign, in Virginia and in Michigan, phone banking, text banking, if you want to get involved there. And certainly honestly, Wisconsin's not that far from Michigan. So if any of you really feel like you want to jump right in the springtime, you can come and help us gather signatures, and we'd love to have your help. So those are the 2 next states that we're going to put a lot of resources in. And then beyond that, all the states that are in blue and orange here are states where we've had forward progress. We're going to be working in Pennsylvania and North Carolina and Minnesota and Arizona. And we've been lobbying in all of those states and more for several years. So it's not as if we just kind of wait to say, oh, things shifted and it looks like it's gonna, it's time for us to talk about our bill. We're looking ahead 5 years and saying, hey, this state might be prime for us in 4 years. So let's start lobbying now. So I hope that, as all the issues that you work on, this is a good way as you're lobbying for the bill in Wisconsin and becoming experts on national popular vote, you can also help us in other states around the country, especially in the next year. And so I do want to spend some time on why we want a national popular vote, because it gives us so many good things for this country. So we no longer would have second place presidents under a national popular vote. We're going to have results that people can understand. We're not going to have to try and explain to people and remind them about, hey, remember when you learned when you were 8 years old about the Electoral College and how maybe the person who got the most votes didn't win in the 1800s, but oh, that's never going to happen again. Yeah, we're going to get rid of that. And we're going to say, hey, whoever gets the most votes is going to become the president. People understand that. We're not going to have these crises of legitimacy where people say, hey, I don't know, is George Bush really the duly elected president? Is Donald Trump really the duly elected president? We're going to not have that. And also, similarly, we're not going to have things like what happened on January 6th, where people say, hey, Joe Biden is not the duly elected president because they clearly had voter fraud in these handful of cities in battleground states. And so we can't trust these results. No, whoever gets the most votes wins. We can all understand that. And it's important to think about when we're talking about this, that it's not just that this has happened twice in the last 20 years, which that alone is quite a lot. We almost had this happen 2 more times. So we are in this era of very close elections right now. And as a result, that means that we're going to keep having this chance for these divergent elections to happen. So in 2004, if 60,000 more voters in Ohio had voted for John Kerry instead of George Bush, John Kerry would have won Ohio, won the Electoral College, and gone on to be the next president of the United States, despite losing the popular vote by 3 million votes, a larger margin than Donald Trump lost the popular vote in 2016. So this isn't just a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. This is something that can affect either party. And quite frankly, if we're looking ahead at our future elections, if I were, say I'm the campaign manager for the Republican candidate for president in 2024, I'd be pretty worried about losing Texas and their what will be 40 electoral votes. If Republicans can't count on those 40 electoral votes anymore, they're going to have a really hard time getting to 270 electoral votes. So it's not just one party or the other. It is, hey, this benefits both of us to not have this kind of wonky system where we have to turn out votes in some states and we completely ignore most of the states. It benefits everyone to say, hey, here are my ideas for the country. Let's turn out the most voters and see whose ideas are more popular. And then, of course, the other time that we almost had a divergent election was, of course, last year in 2020. We were less than 22,000 votes. So 22,000. Let me sink that in. 22,000 votes away from having another divergent election where Donald Trump would have won a second term. And that's not to, tap into any feelings that you may or may not have about Donald Trump, but he lost the popular vote by over 7 million votes. And if 22,000 voters had gone a different way in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, we would have had a second Trump term, despite his popular vote deficit of over 7 million votes. So this system is not working for us, right? We're getting these second place presidents. We're having campaigning only happen in a handful of states. And it really trickles down to a lot of other issues. So for example, federal funding. When we have a national popular vote, this will be a more equitable system. Right now, tax dollars paid for by you and me and Americans across this country are disproportionately leveraged to help swing states or battleground states because they help the president or the candidate for president win the next office. So Dr. John Hudak from the Brookings Institute found that battleground states received 7.6% more federal grants, worth about 5.7% more grant dollars every year that they're a swing state compared to safe states. Now, those numbers might sound like, oh, maybe that's not that much. If you take Tennessee, which during this time period was right there in the middle, number 25 in population, an average size state, if they had been a swing state, they would have received 300 more federal grants worth $60 million every year that they were a swing state. So this is huge amounts of money. And then it's the same thing when we talk about disaster declarations. So this is what the federal government, how they respond to Hurricane Sandy and hurricanes up and down the coastlines and wildfires. Swing states get twice as many disaster declarations as the rest of the country. Now, you'd think that there'd be like a really complicated formula for calculating how much federal funding should be given to certain things, how much local infrastructure was impacted, what's the ability of the local government to respond. And you'd think there'd be this great formula that we could all rely on. But if we look at the fact that swing states are getting twice as many declarations as the rest of the country, we can't deny the fact that partisan politics are being played here in something that's critically important. So with a national popular vote, we take that pork barrel politics incentive away and say, hey, let's not look at that. Let's not look at what state can help me win the next election. Let's do what's right for the people of America, whether they vote or not, quite frankly. At that point, it's not about voters, it's just about people. And with a national popular vote, we're going to have policies proposed by candidates based around what's best for all of us, rather than what's best for voters in certain states. So if we look back at past elections, No Child Left Behind was proposed by a Republican candidate for president and was the largest federal action ever taken into public education in the history of our country. Not something you really expect from a Republican candidate for president, right? But this policy was geared towards winning over suburban moms in the critical battleground state of Ohio. And that's how we ended up with it. And then after George Bush won Ohio, and then won the Electoral College, and of course, in part also because he won Florida, but Ohio was a part of that path to 270. Swing states got twice as many exemptions from No Child Left Behind as the rest of the country. Same thing on the other side of the aisle. When the Obama administration was running for re-election, they had a federal tax credit program promoting clean energy. And Ohio companies got nearly 4 times the average that went to other states. If we look back at the 2020 election, in the presidential and vice presidential debate, fracking was brought up in both instances because it is something that is important to voters in Pennsylvania, a critical battleground state last year. Fracking employs less people nationwide than Oregon's logging industry employs. But no one talks about the logging industry in Oregon, right? No one also talked about at any of those 3 debates that we had, the wildfires that at that time were affecting states that 1 in 5 Americans lived in. And it's not just blue states. It wasn't just the West Coast. It was affecting red states, including Idaho. But all of the states that it was affecting were either decidedly Republican or decidedly Democratic when it came to how their electoral votes were going to go. So because they weren't a battleground state, no one talked about it. So with a national popular vote, we probably would have heard about that because 1 in 5 Americans were living in states that were affected by that. It would have been more of a topic because it's not something that, oh, what are this small amount of voters in these certain states? What matters to them? It's, hey, this is a critical issue for Americans. And so I'm going to talk about it because it's important to help me win votes everywhere. And of course, I do want to mention, especially since our keynote speaker talked about top 5 and then kind of also ranked choice voting. National popular vote and ranked choice voting are compatible. So states can have ranked choice voting in the presidential election, in the general election, and have that tally reported out to calculate for what the national popular vote total is. So I don't want anyone to walk away thinking, oh, well, I like ranked choice voting and I like national popular vote, but they can't work together. They absolutely can. And all it really is when a state like Wisconsin were to pass your law saying, okay, we want to use ranked choice voting for calculating the national, or excuse me, ranked choice voting for awarding our electoral votes and for saying, hey, here's who got more votes in Wisconsin for president. It just has to be a line in that bill saying, we're going to report out our final round of voting for our national popular vote total. That's all the legislature has to do. It's a single sentence. It's in the main bill that we passed last year for explicitly saying how they're going to report out their ranked choice voting totals for when we have a national popular vote for president. So they absolutely can work together. And in fact, it was designed this way because one of the CEO of Fair Vote, one of the large organizations that's been advocating for ranked choice voting for the last 20 years, is one of the co-authors of the national popular vote bill. So it's something that we thought about way back when, and it's ready to go for whenever we actually get to that point where we have ranked choice voting and national popular vote. And this system for a national popular vote doesn't benefit one party or the other. This is a nonpartisan solution that puts voters first. And it's not something that will say, oh, I'm a Democrat, so I should be for this, or I'm a Republican, or I should be for this. No, every vote is equal. So you have people on the other side of the aisle somewhere else in the country that your friends or your family, they should be for this legislation because it makes your vote equal no matter where you go. And it's a system that people can understand and trust, and it will help make it so that we don't necessarily have those people that aren't really trusting the results. And they're saying, oh, Atlanta and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, I don't know that I really believe what the results were out of those cities. No, people will say, hey, the other person got more votes. I understand that. And I know that that's how they ended up winning the presidency. And a national popular vote honestly encourages voter enfranchisement and voter engagement. Battleground states have 11% higher voter turnout than the rest of the country. That's because the people in those states understand that for arguably the most important office, the most visible office, even though as I'm sure you all believe as league members that local elections are also critically important, a lot of voters really just look at what's at the top of the ticket, and they know if their vote matters or doesn't matter. They know if candidates have been campaigning to them or not. So, and it also makes it so that the voter suppression tactics that we see happening will no longer just be targeted at swing states. And this isn't something that's just good for turning out more voters. This is honestly makes our elections more secure because our current system, there we go. Our current system allows bad actors to really focus their voter suppression, or if people really want to commit fraud or anything else, they're able to say, hey, I just need to flip 600 votes in Florida and I can change the outcome of the entire 2000 presidential election. That can't happen under a national popular vote. You've got to change millions of votes across the country. And I have faith in our electoral systems that that's not able to happen. You know, we all know that there's good systems in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so under a national popular vote, candidates are going to campaign everywhere. We're not going to have this system where they're just going to 12 states or less and campaigning there. And our rural voters are going to have an equal voice. You know, our 10 most rural states right now, not a single one of them is a battleground state. And so they get completely ignored. They are better off under a national popular vote. Just like people that live in cities like I do are better off under a national popular vote. They're not, oh, only candidates are going to campaign in these 10 biggest cities. No, that's not what's going to happen. Because if we look at our population of our 10 biggest or our 100 biggest cities, that is the same population right now that lives in rural America. You can't just talk to one group or the other. You've got to talk to everyone, plus the 60% of voters that live in the suburbs and are evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. Similarly, candidates are going to go to all 50 states. They're not just going to camp out in California and New York. You know, California and New York only have 18% of the US population. You're not going to win an election by only talking to 18% of possible voters, right? They're going to go everywhere. And a good way to think about this, you know, people think, oh, they're just going to go to California. there are 14 states that are small states. They have an equal size population together as the state of California. So why would you think that those 14 states would be ignored? They wouldn't. Candidates are going to go all across the country and talk to voters everywhere. So we're not going to have swing states. We're not going to have flyover states. We're not going to have battleground states. We're just going to have America. We're going to have it the way that we elect the president actually reflect what most of us think when we go and cast our ballot, that they're not thinking about, oh, what benefits Oregon or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin. It's, hey, what's better for all Americans? Because I'm casting my ballot as an American, and I think most of you do the same when you're thinking about the presidential election. And so a national popular vote just makes every vote equal. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Barb.
Thanks so much, Eileen, and thanks again for coming to Wisconsin, virtually or in person, to help us understand the national popular vote. And Joy, thanks for your introduction at the beginning. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the national popular vote in Wisconsin, especially with the league in Wisconsin. You might or might not know that the position of the U.S. League is that the direct popular vote method for electing the president and the vice president is essential to representative government. And in 2010, after a 2-year study of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, League of Women Voters US adopted the position that our league supports the use of the National Popular Vote Compact as one acceptable way to achieve the goal of direct popular vote for president until the abolishment of the Electoral College. In 2018, by resolution, the US League added advocacy of the national popular vote to its Making Democracy Work campaign. And it established in 2019 a task force to check in with leagues around the country to see what interest there was and which leagues wanted to support national popular vote. And the task force found that there is significant interest, and a task force is still there and is dedicated to helping local leagues go ahead and educate and advocate for national popular vote. And so in 2020, it reaffirmed at the national convention that national popular vote is part of making democracy work. So what happened in Wisconsin? Okay, 2019 was our big kickoff. We formed a working committee on national popular vote. And actually 2 years ago this month at the 2019 issues briefing, we presented, I think at a breakout session also, our first introduction to our membership statewide about national popular vote. The very next month, Eileen came to Wisconsin in the Green Bay area in De Pere to help train speakers who would either go out and help educate around the state about national popular vote, or at least wanted to understand more themselves. Eileen, can you change to the next slide? I forgot, I couldn't control. So this is our present working group committee. And so I wanted to let you be introduced to them because maybe you know somebody here, and unfortunately we're missing a couple photos. But if you know any of us, it's one way is to reach out to the person on the working committee you do know. We have people, I guess I'm from the Green Bay area, Dorothy, our president, North Woods. I'm not going to go through everybody because I want to leave time for questions. But in the chat, I put out our new email address. And it is, I have to always look, which I should, npvwisconsin@lwvwi.org. You can send an email and it will come to our working group and we can correspond with you directly. Next slide, please. So since our kickoff in 2019, we've continued to advocate and educate mainly around the state, both to members and the public about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So one of our big presentations was just this year in May. We had a virtual presentation due to COVID, and it was to members of the league statewide and to the general public. Over 400 people signed up, and we even had over 200, I think closer to 250 attended, which I think is great because there's a big interest in the national popular vote and understanding it and getting to it. So Eileen again was one of our main speakers in that. Representative Gary Hebel, who's from Sun Prairie and is the sponsor, and I may use that word wrong, sponsor or author, I'm not sure how that goes, of our Wisconsin bill this year, which is AB 246 in the Assembly. And Dr. Barbara Klein from our task force nationally spoke about the league and national popular vote. We've continued to give presentations across the state. I know, to my knowledge, we've put them on in Green Bay, Sheboygan, Oshkosh, Tomahawk, Stevens Point, and La Crosse. Now, if you take a look at this, we're missing some of our bigger population centers in Milwaukee and Dane County, and some other areas, of course, across the state too. But those are our huge population centers. We're working on that now. If you are from those areas, please start talking to your local leagues. We really want to spread the word and get everybody educated on the national popular vote so they can spread the word. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks, Eileen. So I mentioned we have a current pending bill in the Assembly, AB 246, and we had bills into the 2019-2020 session of the legislature, both in the Assembly and in the Senate. Guess what? Never gone to hearing, neither in 2019 or 2021. So that is something we really want to get to happen. So not only our legislators can hear what the public wants, but the public can hear about it more and more, and we can get this bill passed. Next slide, please. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the national popular vote, which I hope you do, there are several easy ways to do it. Eileen's organization, National Popular Vote, is easily reachable. It's nationalpopularvote.com. I put it in the chat. It's also, and again, our email address is here. And that's in the chat also. A really good book, if you want to read about it on your own, is by a journalist named Jesse Wegman, and I pulled out the wrong book, which I don't have in front of me. Sorry, I thought I did. Anyway, by Jesse Wegman, and it is very readable and easy to read, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's called Let the People Pick the President. And then on our website, our state league website, if you go to the resource section, we have a whole toolkit. We have a presentation you can use. It has speaker's notes there, right there for you. Presentation, very much like Eileen gave. I'm not as professionally looking because Dorothy Sky and I mostly put that together. And I think Eileen Strobaum, who's on the committee, helped do the initial one. So Eileen's looks a lot more professional, but ours is really good and very detailed. There's also background material. There's a quiz you can use, a 9 or 10 slide quiz you can use. It's either part of a presentation, or we also have a one-page handout that has questions on the front with the answers on the back that you could hand out at a meeting and use it kind of as, hey, what do you know about how we elect the president? And do you know about the national popular vote? Next slide, please. So what can you do? This is the really important part, and I'm really watching my time here, so I know I'm talking fast, but please contact us. Oh, shoot. We're not gonna have time for questions. Join our working committee. Look on the league website, look under the resource section, look under the events for today that has all these resources listed. Please come sign up. We need more speakers. I'm going to stop. And Joy, I don't know if they're going to cut us out or what.
Yeah, we're going to be leaving in 30 seconds. So there's really no point in asking a question. Ending at 10:40. Thank you to both of you. You're both very passionate, very informative, and very motivating speakers. So we appreciate hearing from you on the National Popular Vote update.